There's a term that sounds a little hokey, but we used to use it called be a gusher, which means you need to walk around and regularly talk about how much you admire and respect and appreciate the people you work with. And being a PR agent means simply that you tell others in the organization and outside the organization and guests that come through and customers, you rave about the great employees you get to work with every day.
Yes.
You know, as we get to be adults, we say, oh, well, we don't really, thanks, but that's not necessary. But the truth is, if everybody that's ever played football, we'll use that, it can identify with, they say, oh, I played some football. But if your old coach happened to walk in the room and say, oh, Jeff is 30 years ago, he's the best linebacker I ever coached. Now he's going to go, oh, whatever. But Jeff feels great.
Yes,
he
would.
feels
yes,
great.
He would.
Welcome to the BetterCulture Podcast, where we make the clear connection between better culture and better business. This podcast is for leaders who want to build stronger teams, drive thriving companies, and enjoy your leadership role along the way. Now here's your host, Brett Hogeveen, a leadership and culture aficionado, keynote speaker, and co-founder of BetterCulture.
Long-term employees are a gift. They carry history, relationships, credibility, and institutional knowledge. But tenure alone doesn't guarantee engagement. In fact, the longer someone stays, the more intentional we need to be about keeping their work meaningful, challenging, and appreciated. Today, we're talking about practical ways to keep long-term team members energized, valued, and growing. Welcome back to the BetterCulture Podcast. Today is a Kim and Brett session where we have myself, the host, but also my father, Dr. Kim Hogeveen, the founder of BetterCulture, and the all-around brainiac that helps us make sure that we're keeping our content and our philosophies way ahead of the market. Kim, thanks for being here today.
Glad to be back, Brett. These are always fun. Looking forward to it. This is a good topic.
Yes, it is. So when you hear the word long-term employees, what comes to mind for you? What should people in the audience be thinking about? I think that's an easy question.
Well, to me, long-term starts about 6 months after they start, particularly in some industries where they're kind of churning through people. But, there tends to be a honeymoon period, Brett, when someone comes on and joins your team. But for different people, it fades at a different time. But I really do think, and maybe you can share a little bit, some data we have about how that initial excitement tends to fade anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're retail, hospitality, maybe you are starting to think this is a long-term employee at 6 months, right? Yeah. In other industries, you may be thinking this is 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years down the road, whatever that might look like, where somebody starts to be a long-term employee. They've been here for a while. They know their job. They do what they're supposed to do at a high level. And we want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them committed. We want to keep them part of the organization.
And
right?
In some ways, I think a long-term employee, almost for me by definition, is within an organization, who do the other employees look to and consider long-term? So if you have a lot of churn, literally a long-term employee could be somewhere 2-3 years. In other companies, oh, you've been here 20 years, you're a long-term. So I think it does vary by industry.
And just for a little stage setting, in my mind, the folks that I want to talk about today are people who they're not likely to move into a different position, to get promoted. They're not on a promotional path. They're folks that are really good individual contributors, solid individual contributors in a role, and we want to keep them happy in that role ongoing. Is that where your head is at on this as well, Kim?
Absolutely. I think these are the foundational staff that give you consistency, day-to-day reliability, dependability. Those are the long-term employees that really make up a backbone of stability within your organization.
And as most of our clients would agree, consistency of execution is what drives a big portion of business success. It's just making sure that we continue to follow the plan, to operate at a high level, to be able to deliver predictable outcomes, results. And a lot of that comes from having a steady group of long-term employees that are happy with their jobs, that are committed, and that want to stay.
Absolutely.
Great. All right. So let's just talk a little bit about what the data looks like. And we see this in our own BetterCulture data, which is that, and we see it in our data, and you'll see it universally in employee engagement data. And that is that there is if you average employee engagement or satisfaction over time across industries, if you just look globally, you'll see that the happiest times in the tenure of an employee's experience with employers in general tends to be near hire. Okay, when someone comes on new, there's a fairly high level of engagement. Then there's a dip, and that dip can start 3 months in, 6 months in, 9 months in. But that dip, and it's not major, but it is noticeable in the data. That dip in someone who's 1 year, 2 year, maybe even out to 3 or 4 years of tenure with an organization shows that they're a little less happy during that period, from sort of 6 months all the way out to, it could go to 3, 4, even 5 years. And then if you look at the average engagement, the average happiness, the average level of cultural satisfaction, employee satisfaction beyond that 5-year march, it kind of slowly and steadily goes up forever. Okay, on average, 10-year employees are a bit happier than 9-year employees, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what the global data looks like. I want to share a few thoughts on that, Kim, but see if you've got anything you want to share on that before we dive in.
We've absolutely, it's been surprising to me how often we see that pattern, again, across industries. And we're going to talk about things we can do to maybe anticipate that and how we can maybe take steps to inhibit that from happening. A couple things I just want to mention, though, right at the start. I think sometimes it can be that during the recruitment period, there may be a tendency to slightly overpromise. And so if
you don't say when we're trying to recruit talent in.
If you do that, there may be an understandable drop after a while when they see that you don't quite live up to those promises. The other thing I think that's just practical is a lot of times when you bring in a new person, they have a lot of attention. They have a lot of people checking on them and making sure they're okay, and they're in orientations and all that thing. And then that fades and that attention goes away, and there's a bunch of new people that get all the attention all of a sudden 6 to 8 months in. So I think psychologically it makes some sense why we might anticipate this drop-off.
Yeah. Now, I agree. So on the front end of that curve, the drop-off within the first 6 months to a year, that makes sense. I agree with that entirely. What I think is interesting, and when I talk to folks and we share this data, they say, I don't think my folks that have been here 20 years are my happiest folks, like they may lack a little energy or a little dynamism, or may feel a little stuck, or it's not where your highest potential folks are. And so I've dove into this just a little bit. And what I'm afraid is happening in too many organizations, and the reason why today's conversation is so important, is it's not very many employees that make it to 5 to 10 to 20 years to 30 years. It takes a special culture, and it takes sort of a unique employee that is happy in that role in the long term. And so here's what I'm thinking, Kim, and I'd like your feedback on this. I think the reason you see that engagement is not that just by nature being at a place 10 years makes you happier. I think people who are dissatisfied leave. And so the average moves up slowly, because you have long-term employees that have been here 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and we're not keeping them engaged. And so they're dissatisfied, they're quietly unhappy, they're looking for opportunities, they're feeling, not feeling the love or the appreciation, and they move on. And then, so sort of those that leave, that average just kind of moves up more by attrition than by the fact that by nature, someone who's been somewhere for 20 years is happier. What do you think about that?
I think that makes complete sense. I also think, and I know we had I think the intro title for this was how to keep long-term employees engaged. I really think what we're going to talk about today, Brett, as you outlined this, is we're just going to talk about how to keep employees engaged.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not just long-term.
Yeah, we don't really need to define long-term per se. We're going to talk about some techniques that can be used to help your employees stay engaged. And you're right, the people that get most disengaged, either they leave on their own, or if you're a good leader, you'll help them exit. So some of this will be taken care of by people going out the door as well.
Yeah. Okay, so if we think about employees that are 5 years plus, I'm just going to use that as a general lens of long-term employees. Kim, what are some ways that managers, that leaders can actively do to think about what can we do to make sure these folks are satisfied with their jobs, engaged with their work, committed to the company, that want to be there, that feel bought into what we're doing, and stay committed over time. So today we're going to hit on a list of those. Kim, why don't you start us off with maybe a first initial perspective?
I'm going to start off with this one, but I'm going to turn it back to you pretty quickly because I happen to know this is a passion of yours. But I want to at least introduce it. And it's one of those that sounds like, well, duh. But we've got quite a bit of data now from our mindset survey to show that there's a gap between how employees feel and how supervisors think employees feel on this. And that is simply this. How good a job are you doing recognizing the efforts and contributions your employees are making? Are you actually being effective with recognition processes that make an impact? And again, Brett, I know you've done a lot with this, and so I'm going to turn this back to you to talk a little bit about the difference between somebody who says, oh yeah, I think my employees feel pretty well recognized, and in fact, what it takes to actually make that true.
Yes, the data is clear that most employees feel at least some degree underappreciated for the work that they do. That's not just long-term employees, that's all employees. But I think that tends to land a little heavier on longer-term employees because they're not as many check-ins and touch bases, and they're just not given as much attention. They're just expected to come in, do their job, et cetera. And so I do think clearly the data shows that most employees feel underappreciated, and that's likely going to land heaviest on the folks that don't need a lot of supervision or guidance because they just show up and do their jobs, right? So it's been almost 10 years ago, Kim, and I don't know how you avoided this assignment, but I was invited with one of our clients to spend a day. They were spending a day and a half, their top 40 leaders, doing a full day and a half retreat focused on nothing but what could they do to get better at showing employees that they were appreciated. And I was invited to come up for the first day and lead that brainstorm discussion, et cetera. And it was really at that point that I sort of caught the bug of saying, whoa, employers are not nearly as good as they should be about finding unique and creative and honestly effective ways to show people that they're appreciated.
And I've been around a while, and I will tell you, it is still the only time I've ever seen a company do that.
Yes.
And this was a particularly well-led company, in my opinion. Interesting, with a CEO who had come through not the finance route, but through the HR route.
That's true.
And actually had a passion about this. And I was just intrigued, and I was really interested in the follow-up and what you experienced in that day and a half.
Yeah, well, a small aside, the reason I was joking about how you avoided it is because it was in North Dakota in February.
That's how I avoided it.
I do know you went up there for one cold trip, but this was another that North Dakota cold is different than the Nebraska cold in the middle of winter. But it was a great experience. It was a great experience, and we came up with 59 very specific ideas of ways that their leaders could show employees that they were appreciated. And now I'm not prepared today to share 59 ideas, but I mean, I remember one of the ideas, just as an example, they had a receptionist that they were in a big corporate office center. They had a receptionist that sat in the general lobby that was shared across the entire building. And that receptionist had been there for many years. And she was very appreciated. She was the front door to their business. She greeted, they had clients that came into the building, but she sat by herself and she was disconnected from the organization. And they wanted to let her know she was appreciated. Now, this is the point where my more skeptical audience needs to just cool it for a second here. But what they decided to do for her was a spontaneous flash mob. Coming back from lunch, they had people just milling about the lobby, looking like they were coming and going. And then some music came on, and it was just 30 seconds. But they probably had 25, 30 people in the lobby that decided to do a little song, a little dance. They all turned at her. They said thank you. They delivered a little gift basket, and she couldn't believe that they went to that much effort to make sure that everybody knew that she was seen and valued and appreciated for the work that she does.
And you don't have to do a flash dance, but I would bet you something. That lady is probably retired by now.
Probably.
And I'll bet you if you had lunch with her today and said, tell me 3 or 4 things you remember about your 30-year career there, I'll bet that's in that 3.
It's got to be in the top 3. How could it not be?
And I found that list you came back with just intriguing. And I want to make sure you understand most of the things on that list took maybe 2 minutes to do. That's on the extreme end. But what you had was this whole group of managers that collectively thought, yeah, I do okay with recognition. But they came out of that exercise, I'm guessing each one of them with at least 15 more ideas that didn't take a lot of time that they had never thought of. It's not that they think of it and decide not to do it. It's so many things like we talk about with Better Culture. Very few people get up in the morning and say, I'm going to be a lousy leader.
Yeah.
It just comes naturally to them. But the point is, they walk right by these opportunities. So what they were really doing with that management group is increasing their awareness of to see those opportunities, to make sure your good people know they're appreciated. And it does, small things matter immensely. In
Absolutely. Small things, and honestly, being consistent. I mean, not going 18 months without finding a way to make sure somebody knows that their work is appreciated. It doesn't need to be overboard. It needs to be genuine. It needs to be something that is commiserate or is in balance with the amount of effort that the person put in, right? If your top salesperson has gotten an extra $1 million of sales 5 years in a row, and you say, hey, great, here's a couple of movie tickets, thank you. That's not gonna do it, right? So there are some basic types of things that we wanna think about when we show appreciation. But I think the most important thing is to adjust our mindset to say that's part of our job as managers and leaders, is to make sure that our long-term employees, all of our employees, but our long-term employees for this session, feel appreciated on a regular basis. And I think the most effective way to do that is to challenge yourself as a leader to vary the way that you show that appreciation at least a bit, right?
Absolutely.
Don't just say thanks every Friday as they're walking out the door. Don't just do a handwritten note, once every 6 months. Don't just figure out some other, just a little bit creative ways to make sure they know they're appreciated.
And one of the things that's going to inhibit you from doing that is if you have this in your mind that everyone must be treated the same. It is a killer. Effective appreciation is personalized for that individual. Yeah. I remember I had a terrific group of executives that work with me, and one of them just been working extra hard, doing a fantastic job. And I thought, and this is years back, today I do something, but she would really enjoy a Bose in her office. So I came up for the weekend, and
like a Bose stereo system?
And just a couple of us went in, we just installed. So when she walked in that morning, music was playing, it was just there. And I remember I had a question from an outside visitor that day, and they said, what did you do? And I explained that, and they said, well, won't all the executives be jealous? I mean, you just put one only in her office? That kind of thinking will inhibit you from being good at making sure people know that you recognize their contribution and they're appreciated.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the next topic here on long-term employees. But I'll just mention, a lot of my good clients, particularly more youthful organizations, take a little bit of time to figure out what would my team appreciate. How do I like to be recognized? What types of things would they appreciate? And you knew this person well enough to know they liked to listen to music on a regular basis. And so you customized your recognition or your appreciation act to what they would appreciate, right?
And something they don't expect.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be one step further than they expected from you.
Yes.
Okay?
All right, let's go. So first point was show them some appreciation on a regular basis. What's another way we can keep long-term employees committed and engaged?
It's what I call being a PR agent. Brett, there's a term that sounds a little hokey, but we used to use it, called be a gusher, which means you need to walk around and regularly talk about how much you admire and respect and appreciate the people you work with. And being a PR agent means simply that you tell others in the organization and outside the organization, and guests that come through and customers, you rave about the great employees you get to work with every day.
Yes.
As we get to be adults, we say, oh, well, we don't really, thanks, but that's not necessary. But the truth is, if everybody that's ever played football, we'll use that, it can identify with, they say, oh, I played some football. But if your old coach happened to walk in the room and say, oh, Jeff is 30 years ago, he's the best linebacker I ever coached. Now he's going to go, oh, whatever. But Jeff feels great.
Yes,
he
would.
feels great.
Yes, he would.
All right. So this be a PR agent is such an opportunity that's there. And all it takes is for you to have a focus on letting other people know about why you have a given employee with you that is so terrific and how much they contribute to the company.
Yes, absolutely. And that kind of explains when we go back to your small town where you're from, Dad, why you always want to just hang out on Main Street, just kind of putzing around. You're hoping you're going to run into an old coach. Is that the idea?
Never happened. But I was hoping I'd run into that teacher or coach back there somewhere. It's one of the advantages, though, of being in a small town. You don't have to be that good to be the best linebacker you ever coached.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't have been the best linebacker. Yeah. Maybe quarterback or something like that. So fun. All right. So what's another one? So we've talked about appreciation. Being a PR agent is kind of a spinoff of that, right? But I really like that one. And that's a great concept for people to really double click on and think about how could I do more PR for my deserving people?
Well, let's go to one that's more operational. I think there is a terrific opportunity in many industries to create what we call a career ladder.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Yep.
Uh-oh, this is an important one.
This is one that Brett's smiling because he knows this is one of those that I think is low-hanging fruit, and it's a little frustrating to me how few places do it. But a career ladder, in the way I'm using the term, simply means giving employees an opportunity to go up a pay grade, up a status position, but not create a different job.
Yes.
You're not promoting them to a different set of tasks or a different job description. They're just getting recognition for being excellent in the job description they're in now.
Yes.
And career ladder programs frequently don't have to be very costly, actually. One of the things I would suggest with career ladder programs is, though, no one can ever apply to go up from, let's say, can I use an old QLI example?
Sure, yeah.
There? We had a position called rehab trainers, and we decided to create a mentorship level, a mentor, rehab trainer mentor. But no one could apply for that. You had to be invited to go into the mentor program, which got some additional training. They got a few additional perks, but it was another pay grade up. And that was so powerful in helping us retain and motivate our best people that 3 years later, we realized, wow, we've got some mentors that are now hitting it out of the park. We're going to create another tier called Rehab Trainer Professional. And they got some things like, and if you're a professional, for example, the goal was, they got some additional training, but the goal there is they could give a tour of the entire company. Those professionals, they just didn't know the task that they had in their job description. They understood the whole philosophy of the organization.
Right.
And that became an incredible retention tool for us over the years.
Yes. So if you're listening, we will do an entire episode at some point on how to build an effective career ladder program. Today, we're not going to go that deep into it. But imagine you're a tenured employee. You've been in the same role for 6, 7, 8 years. You're feeling like there's not immediate sort of opportunity for advancement. If you were presented with an opportunity that said, hey, look, you're especially valued in this role. We'd like to elevate your level of impact to a degree. We'd like status to a degree. We'd like to maybe give a modest pay increase, but to give you some additional status, help maybe position you as sort of a coach or a resource to some of the other folks in this area without significantly changing your roles or responsibilities. Imagine what that does for what we're talking about in this episode of helping somebody stay engaged and feel like there is some progress, some progression, some appreciation, right? And then what if 2 years later there was an additional opportunity beyond that? And I happen to know, Kim, that when you were CEO of QLI, that those mentors and professionals, they got a lot of special attention from you, from the executives, from the leadership team. They were invited into decision-making processes. They were, right, all of these things that help people feel, again, increasingly engaged with the organization.
When I was CEO, there was only one thing that could get me to send an all-staff email, and that is if someone got promoted to a mentor or a professional. It was that, and I wanted to always have people recognize how key that was, because, Brett, when we brought in new people, you always want them to attach to the right role models.
Yes.
And so what we could say is find a mentor or a professional.
Yes.
Your role model is right there in front of you.
And in our industry, these are frontline employees. These are certified nursing assistants. These are folks that are we're not talking about upper level leadership. We're talking about folks that are in the most important frontline roles in an organization. And how can we keep great people there doing that great work?
Because, the two things. It also increases the pay scale in terms of how far they can continue to get. They aren't
Yes.
locked in
Yes.
at, okay, you're at the top of the pay grade now.
Right.
No, it gives them an opportunity to go further on that.
Yeah.
And that is also a real value.
All right. Now, we will, some point. That's such an important topic. We'll do a whole episode on career ladders at some point.
Yep, and I know you want to move on. I'm going to hit one more thing, though, because
I knew we were going to get rocking and rolling here.
If you don't do this, what I see so many companies do is they promote people into other positions at which they are marginally competent.
Right.
So you have now Peter principled. You've promoted people up until they hit a spot that they're marginally competent, instead of letting them continue to do what they are fantastic at by giving them that ladder within the job description where they excel. And that's that. But I see that mistake all the time, of promotion instead of creating a career ladder.
I could not agree more. It's such an important point.
Okay.
So I don't want to move on because it's not important. I only want to move on because I know in the future we'll do a whole episode just on that.
All right.
All right. So the next one that at least I have on my bulleted list that we said we might talk about is maybe a unique way we could think about using these employees, or some unique experiences we could allow them to have. Talk a little bit about that.
I think it is very powerful for the upper management to step out of the spotlight and let your good employees step into the spotlight. And what I mean by that is there's opportunities to represent the company. Mm-hmm. And you know, it may be a social gathering that the company's bought a table for. Well, instead of the executive team going, have your best employees represent the company at that. If the company's receiving an award or recognition, instead of the CEO always going up and having everybody applaud, and isn't that CEO a wonderful person, have other employees represent the company. If there's tours to be given through the organization, instead of always having your marketing people do that, have your best employees involved in that tour, or at least in the planning. So it's again, stepping out of the spotlight, upper management, and having your employees have a chance to feel like they represent the company, so their pride is tied to the company as a whole, not just their job description.
Yes, absolutely. Just, think how many opportunities there are to engage in some way externally, for the most part.
Correct.
In some way, whether that's with your customers, whether that's with the community, on maybe giving back to the community, or media, or charitable events, or all of those things. And I love this idea of saying that's a great place to make sure that we're thinking about folks that have served the company well for 10 years and say, hey, any chance you'd like to go to that event? Any chance you'd like to join me at that table? Any chance you'd like to XYZ? This is a great idea for a way to make sure that our long-term, really high quality, just good, stable folks feel seen and valued and appreciated. It's a great idea. And it's underused, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Any more?
Sure. Brett, we're a pretty big fan of mentor programs if they're set up well, and maybe that's some point you'll do a program on how to do that well, because most companies, unfortunately, don't do it as well as they could. But if you give an employee that is really, really excellent the opportunity to mentor another staff member, I think that's a way to really make them feel appreciated, respected. Mm-hmm. And so starting a mentor program and allowing your excellent employees to serve as mentors is another thing that I would suggest.
Absolutely. Use some of that experience. Use some of their ability to do their jobs really well, and to understand how to do that individual contributor role to help other people, right? It lightens the load on training departments. It lightens the load on managers. You just want to be careful with this one that you're not putting a lot of extra responsibility on folks that they don't appreciate or want. Right. So correct. I would say it's probably not every long-term employee that says, oh, sure, I'd love to coach new people, right? Or I'd love to help someone else figure out the job. Yes. But there's a subsection that really would. If you could make sure that they felt appreciated for doing it, felt valued for being that mentor to folks.
Your extroverts will like the opportunity to represent the company. Your introverts are more likely to like to mentor one-on-one.
Sure.
So you need, again, to tailor these
yes.
to the person, to what will make them feel recognized and appreciated.
Right. Yeah. Tap into their expertise, tap into that value, make sure that they feel, again, really valued and appreciated for the role that they have today in the company. So putting them in a position to be either formal or informal mentors, right? To help folks learn, grow, feel comfortable, et cetera, is a great idea.
Okay, one last one from me.
Yeah, let's go one last one.
This is a bit more of a stretch.
Yes.
I grant you that. But I do think it's worth mentioning. If you want employees long-term to stay engaged, sometimes it's helpful to think beyond just a work setting and think about their extended family at home. So anything that you can do to engage or involve their family members, so their family members feel that they understand the company and have a bit of a stake in where their wife or husband or father or mother, where they work, is really, I think, a powerful way. So when that individual leaves work and goes home, those folks there are actually positive and encouraging about where they work, as opposed to, I don't even know what dad does. He just shows up and then he comes back home at some point.
Interesting.
So anything you can do to pull in those extended family members, I think is really powerful.
Do you have an example or two of what that might look like? Because I've seen this in my experience, and I know that it's powerful, right? It's a shift between, I don't know, mom or dad has a job versus we as a family, we feel like we're a part of this company's sort of family, right? Yes. And I know family is a word that gets overused on the workplace side of things, but that is a tangible shift from it's a job to we feel like an extended part of this organization's sort of family. So can you give us an example or two of how a company does that?
Yep. And I think on several of these things, Brett, we both know this is worth a lengthy conversation.
Yes.
So I'm taking something really profound and important, and I'm going to chip it down to just a couple quick ideas.
Sure.
But companies occasionally will say they do family inclusive events. But they don't. What they want to do is really good. Unfortunately, how they actually do it, how welcome they make the family at that event, how they structure it, how they greet that spouse or the kids when they come, who were probably kind of drugged there. Those sorts of things are really, I think, it's not just what you do, but how you do it. But if you do it well, like the fireworks in the evening that QLI does, or the opening the whole campus for Halloween treats to bring all the grandkids and everybody comes through, everything like that, or the open day at Funplex all day long that anytime they want to come, that truly, I think, does help in that regard.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is so powerful and so simple and so overlooked is if your upper management will take the time to simply drop a note to someone's spouse.
Sure.
And say, I don't believe we've had a chance to meet, but I do want you to know just how valuable your spouse is to our company.
Sure.
And what they contribute every day. And I just want to take the time to let you know, I know at times it's a burden on the family because they're working overtime or they come in when they need to, but just how wonderful they are.
Yeah. I think those are great examples. Two more just simple ones that pop to mind for me that I've seen recently is, number one, I have just a neighbor. My son was just talking about how they do a bring your child to work day, right? And that's an old fashioned idea.
Yeah.
It's been around forever and ever. I didn't even know companies were doing that all that often anymore. But one of my neighbors recently got to go with his dad to work. And it's just a simple way to let people know we want your family here. We want people to understand what you do. We want to help them learn and grow. It's a simple approach, right? And something, honestly, that shouldn't be overlooked. Another just easy one. I have an organization that really works hard to let family members. They have a nice building, nice facilities, et cetera, and they don't use it all the time, right? Especially weekends. And they work really hard to let people know if you're throwing a birthday party, if you're throwing a celebration, please come use our facility. Invite your family, invite your friends. We want to use the resources of the company. We want you to feel like those are available to you as employees in the right capacities, et cetera. And again, those are little things that they send the message to families that this is more than a paycheck. It's more than just a job.
I absolutely love that last one, Brett. It is so powerful. And I'm not a big advocate for work-life balance. I think it is a stupid term, to be blunt. I love work-life integration. And that means you work for a company that recognizes you're more than just an employee, you're a full human, and you have a family outside. We want work-life integration, where your family life makes you better at work, and we at work make you better in your family. It's the right way to treat people.
Love it. All right. Well, hopefully that's been a pretty good rundown of some ideas of what, if you're a leader, if you're an executive, whatever your role is, things you could think about to help keep your long-term employees engaged. Any last little bullets or items we haven't talked about that we should mention, Kim, on the way out?
Maybe one that sounds, maybe end with the simplest one.
Sure.
I think people feel more involved and will feel like they're more engaged if we spend a little bit more time asking questions and listening and asking for their opinion.
Yeah.
Or maybe what we call bringing them under the tent, sharing information about their company.
Yeah.
That maybe by looking at their job description, they wouldn't normally have access to that, but if it's their company, there's no reason to not share information readily about what the company's doing and why. So maybe listening a bit more.
Yes.
And sharing information a bit more often would be another suggestion I would have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the time. Thanks for the ideas. I hope this has been helpful to anybody watching or listening, because long-term employees, they don't just stay engaged by accident. They stay engaged when they feel valued and challenged and trusted and seen. So if you want loyalty to last, you have to keep investing in it. You've got to keep an eye toward it, because tenure, that's just history, but engagement, that takes intentional leadership.
Terrific. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah. Thanks again for another episode of the Better Culture Podcast. Before we wrap up, I want to share something exciting. For the first time ever, Better Culture has launched a virtual leadership academy, a 12-month experience for leaders and managers who are serious about expanding their leadership skills, impact, and influence. Whether you're investing in yourself or a team of managers, this program was built for you. If you're serious about building something better, this is your next step. Learn more at betterculture.com/academy.